That's what I'm talking about.
Wait! Okay, now, from the beginning.
Hit it, boys.
Welcome to AI Arms Race, Leading Without Losing, a special 5-part pulse check series from Enrollify. I'm Dr. Scott Cline, a 20-year higher education executive turned consultant. In this series, we'll be going behind closed doors to hear the real conversations happening within higher education admissions and high school leaders. We'll explore how AI is already being reshaping admissions and why few want to be the first to admit that they're using it, for fear of triggering an arms race. Together, we'll ask, how can you bring what's already happening into the open without feeling the very competition we're trying to avoid? Today, I'm joined by Dr. John Haller, an admissions and enrollment management leader, and now a higher education consultant and professor. Most recently, he served as a special assistant to the president for strategic initiatives at Denison University. For 10 years, John served as the vice president of enrollment management and new student strategies at the University of Miami, where he led the movement from a largely merit-based to a hybrid merit and need-based financial aid strategy where 100% of financial aid is met. Previously, he served at St. Joseph's University, Drexel, and Vanderbilt University. He holds a doctorate in higher education from the University of Pennsylvania. Welcome, John, to the podcast.
Great to be with you on the podcast. Thanks so much for the opportunity.
So great to have you here, John. Where are you seeing AI, and particularly AI agents, being used in higher education admissions today by colleges and universities?
To kick it off, certainly to me, within enrollment management marketing, to help with the content development and frequently asked questions. I really think this involves the resourcing of the team and how the value proposition is authentically and coherently communicated and the different media platforms where content is delivered. So I think that's one area. At Miami, we were exploring using AI to review admission essays. But what I think is even more fascinating is that we were looking to use AI to determine if there were keywords in students' essays that were predictive of retention. Now, I had a conversation a couple weeks ago with a colleague who works for a state flagship institution, and because 80% of the transcripts that they received are in-state in a specific format, they were looking to calculate high school GPAs using AI because of that consistency. And to me, the key really is to think about AI as a tool, and I use it not as a crutch when I'm writing my blog or creatively, but really just as a tool.
Does any of that make you pause or cause worry for you as we're quickly running into AI in the admission space?
I guess because to some degree, it's a tool that's still evolving, and we want to ensure that we're using it in a responsible way to streamline and make the admission process more efficient. I think we want to make sure that we're not dehumanizing the admission process to make it feel like people with feelings and human thoughts are not involved in reviewing applications, that the applications really are being written and drafted by people. And so there's still people involved in the admission process.
Mm-hmm. Very good. And John, you're one of those people who is a higher education leader, worked at the executive levels, sat with conversations that are those closed doors with boards, with presidents, with their cabinets, and down with your leadership team on the admissions side. What does it look like for those conversations currently behind those closed doors around what universities and colleges are using for AI and what they're thinking about as they go into the future?
If I think about this from the student perspective, I think there's some concern that students may be using them for essays, but for students to show up as their authentic selves and to tell their stories about who they are and what makes their hearts go pitter patter, I just don't think using AI in that context would really be helpful. To me, it's a tool to help streamline the admission process, and I think AI can help make the process more efficient. When I left Miami, we were receiving something like above 50,000 applications and had a pretty lean team of part-time readers. So in a very condensed timeline with many different admission plans. So where we could rely on technology to improve and streamline the admission process, this cheat just seems to make sense to me, again, as a tool to streamline a process.
Adding to that, John, you're really talking about a really interesting point about, on the high school side, where we're seeing high school students using potentially AI during their application process, but also in the teaching and learning that's happening on the high school side. And then we're also using it on the admissions side, and we're grappling with that on both sides of the divide here. Do you think there's some type of reluctance to be able to talk about this more openly on the university and the college side about how we're using AI? You talk about, certainly the marketing, the agents, the communications, and the review process, because there will be the sense that, if we are using it, the other side is then open to use it as well.
It's funny. I mean, I was having a conversation with a high school teacher earlier today, and they were talking about how initially there were faculty, and I saw this on the university side as well. Initially, there was just reluctance or to say, no, we're going to lock it down. We're going to shy away from it. We're not going to use it. We're going to put guardrails around it. And as the tools continue to evolve, then there's just become a greater understanding that this is not going away as a tool, as a system that's going to be used for content development or for helping to answer questions. So I think to the degree we embrace it to a broader degree, that this is something that's going to be used far and wide in all of it, from a teaching and learning perspective, from an application process, from a processing perspective. I don't think it's wise for us to turn a blind eye to it. Now, I think there's opportunities from a guardrails perspective to say, how do we use the tool in a way that's productive and efficient for student learning, and involve it in the admission process? And I'll go back to the high school classroom. So I even see this at the college level. I read an article the other day where in some teaching and learning sessions, they're using blue books again, right? So they're having students write essays in the classroom to make sure that they're using their authentic selves and their knowledge base as they're drafting papers, as they're involved in exams. I think all of that is something that it may seem a little bit like a throwback, but it's just, again, using a tool responsibly. So you're not putting, or you're not even tempting students to use a tool that otherwise wouldn't help with their long-term learning. And there's a lot of conversation about return on investment to a college degree. And sure, I think that's really important, but there's a piece of this too. It's also about preparing students for their fifth job. It's not that first job, it's that fifth job that's even yet to be created. And the adaptive skill sets that we're trying to provide students with, how to analyze and solve problems. How do they approach problem solving, communicate their ideas? How do they argue, persuade, and debate openly in a classroom in an effective and a respectful manner? So learning about AI in the classroom from a technical skill perspective and how it's being applied and how it's adapting, I think is a useful tool now.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you brought back some, memories, and my hand is trembling a little bit as an undergrad history major of those blue books, though. So you brought that straight back into my memory again of trying to scribble everything down into a blue book. You also bring up around here is like, you're also now on the consulting side in the higher ed space. As you've sat so many years as a professional, as a leader on the institutional side, if you're engaging with, an institution that's grappling with like, how do we talk about AI agents in the admission space? What are some key things that you think you'd bring to that conversation that they definitely need to be talking about and thinking about right now?
If I were advising an institution today, I would first want to learn about how they're resourced relative to developing marketing content and value proposition communication. Is there an opportunity there just based on resource allocation and content delivery? I'd want to learn more about their admission process and bottlenecks that they have in their system and how technology could be applied to help streamline that process. I'd work to understand where applications come from and to what degree could technology be used to streamline either essay reading or application reading or GPA calculation. And I'd want to know why students leave the institution and working to see, is there a way that AI could help and facilitate? Is there a level of prediction that could be applied to persistence? I mean, ultimately, that's really the magic. Working to assist students on their journey towards degree completion and or goal attainment, and what tools are we using to help them get to or cross the finish line?
Mm-hmm. Very good. And, would you be an advocate of having more open conversations from the institutional side that are open and public about exactly how AI is using, or should this be a closed door conversation in your mind?
I think the more open, the better. I mean, when I was at Miami, we actually formed an AI committee that involved intercollegiate athletics, our healthcare system, IT, university communications, enrollment management, and some other areas. And we started talking about shared best practices and how we were using AI in our different areas across the institution. So not only could we be listening to what each other was doing and then having our ear to the rails of what other institutions were doing, so we could come up with best practice principles or common threads that worked across the university. So to the degree that I think inside and outside of the classroom, there's collaborations on campus where people are talking about the common threads they're seeing and the way they're using AI and those tools across the institution. I think that just makes it more responsible and a better way of shared practice.
Mm-hmm. And where there's a lot of fear right now from both the high school student, the high school staff that are working on that side and the institution side, more of these conversation and that vulnerability, I think, builds that trust as well. That's key to these conversations to be able to have them in a productive way. But John, this is also a very, personal experience for you as well, because you have a, rising senior about to, hit the stride into the university and college application process. What are some takeaways from your own kids' experience in this current time and space, and what are they thinking about, and what are you hearing, and how are you guiding that a person so close to your own heart that way?
There's some days that I feel like I'm helping, and there's some days I feel like it's an epic fail. And having been on the other side of it with my son as he's going through his journey has been really interesting, just to see how he's using and how his school is using technology to assist in his college search process. So, I think about the use of AI just as a college search tool. And I know my son's counselor, bless her heart, tried to use AI effectively to help him with his college search, but it just wasn't a tool that had enough teeth to it that she could help streamline or develop a college search process. And really, this goes back to the responsible use of AI in someone who's doing more information gathering and listening and learning to what a student's interests are, and developing a refined series of questions so you could use AI as a tool. So once I was able to dig in with him and ask some really deep questions about what's important to you, where are your values, what are you looking for, beyond location, size, or distance from home, we were able to develop and craft somewhat of a college list based on common interest criteria. And it just came by, I think, responsibly and smartly using AI as a tool to ask specific probing questions that would generate answers that I think best match his interests. So that was the way that we started it. But again, this goes back to, it really involved a human and personal interaction and personal attention, and someone who was doing real listening in the process to streamline and probe so the prompts could be written that would spit out the results that I thought were authentic and accurate to what his interests were.
Mm-hmm. And this might date myself and maybe you, John, as well, but do you think this is more like the similarities of moving from when you had to actually send off a postcard to get information about a university to being able to access all this information pre-AI on online websites and those type of things? Is this more similar to that, or is this much different from your own son's experience?
Yeah, the way I would describe it is it's really just an iterative process. The process that I went through 100 million years ago was very much, the old FISC guide, or if people, I'm really dating myself, the old Gorman report, which ranked colleges by major. And then with the advent of technology, was being able to sleuth and research different university websites, and then just ask some prompts or using guidebooks or online web tools to do searches. Now it's just gone to another level on steroids, where you can get specific information. But again, it really takes being able to ask and use prompts in an educated, informed way. So you're not just saying, show me medium-sized colleges in the state of Pennsylvania. Okay, well, that's great, because that will certainly spit out some real answers. But it's coming to, okay, show me medium-sized institutions that are near urban environments, that are faith-based, where students thrive inside and outside of the classroom, that have strong community services and clubs and club sports opportunities. And that way you really start to get a more granular and specific search response to those different levels of probing questions. And again, I think it's just a tool that continues to evolve iteratively. That's how we used it, that how it's different from how we used it. It's just a different form of technology that we're being refined and adapting to.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it's a helpful thread of seeing this as more of a continuation in different ways. Obviously, it accelerates quickly or changes direction, but seeing this more as a through line versus a radical departure or something like that. And sometimes it is a radical departure. We got to realize that as well. John, from your son's experience, what's one or two like key takeaways, from his experience and, probably his fellow students as well that you're interacting and seeing right now that you give back onto if you were sitting back in the seat of a VP of Enrollment Management or executive leader on the high school or the college or university side? What would be the advice you'd give from your own students' experience currently with AI?
This is going to sound old school and corny to start, but I'll get there. But I think active listening and genuinely caring is, if you start from those positions where listen to what the student is actually interested in and show some genuine concern or interest about what his or her interests are and what they want to do and where they want to go and what their hopes and dreams and aspirations are. From there, if you've done that good homework or that good grounding work, you can use technology as a tool to help shape where the student may find legitimate, genuine interest. And again, this goes back to, I completely disagree with the notion that there is one perfect school or university or college that fits every student. There's a whole slew of them that are going to match their interests. It's just a matter of doing that homework and that research to figure out what they are. And I think that involves really just granular relationship building work before you apply the tool of technology and AI to get there. And I think sometimes the easy way out for us is just to say, okay, let's just ask a prompt and see what it spits out and off we go. But it really takes some back work to make sure you're using the tool responsibly that's going to give you the results that ultimately lend to the outcome that you're interested in.
And as we know, trust in higher education is, and by almost all measures at an all-time low. And that's not a new thing. This has been a phenomenon that's been building. But then you also add on the traditional, quote unquote anxieties, like the unknowns of going to, making a big decision. Sometimes the biggest financial decision that families and a student are going to make in their lives as well. And so there's always been this anxiety and fear around this transition point and, what's in that black box that, happens in the admissions process. So what are some recommendations you have, for higher ed leaders to be able to bridge that gap back to the high schools, the partners that we have there and those high school students to have more of these conversations and alleviate and build that more trust around particularly AI in this time and space that we have so much not trust in the current environment?
Yeah, I guess for me, it feels like, again, that goes back to a relationship building start, but it's also about casting a broad enough net. So you're not so overly focused on one particular institution. So you're not narrowed in too early, too fast, and you end up saying, okay, I'm just going to apply to the school because it feels like it checks every box. And then you have buyer's remorse, right? I think ultimately it's casting a broad enough net, keeping all your options open as long as you can. And Scott, you and I would agree. We think about this, I think, in the focus of, or the paradigm of an academic pyramid where you start broadly and then over time you narrow down as you go through your academic and personal journey, rather than starting really narrow too soon and then trying to broaden out because you're bobbing and weaving. And I'm not saying the entire process has to be linear, but it should be somewhat directional in a sense that it's an evolution that allows you to focus to a more greater degree the more you're learning and the more you're using AI and technology as generative tools to help you understand what are your true interests and passions.
Mm-hmm. And any advice or suggestions for educational leaders, like you and I were both sitting in those spots, to be able to pay that dividend back to our partners at the high school side and the high school students?
Yeah, back to one of your earlier points that I think was great. Don't shy away from AI as a tool, right? It's not going away. It's an evolving tool. We're going to continue to learn more about it, but embrace the tool, embrace learning about as much as you can and how it can help streamline or make the work that you're doing more productive and efficient. And I think, again, there's a piece that how are you using it responsibly in and out of the classroom that helps with student learning. But I think just trying to turn a blind eye to it and say, no, we're not going to use it, or no, this is not something that's going to be available would be irresponsible because students and professionals use it in the workplace every day.
Exactly. Well, John, thank you so much for being on the podcast. It's been very enlightening and helpful for the audience as well. Where can people find you in order to talk to you more about this and other subjects?
It's a great question. So I write a monthly blog at johnhaller.org. If you're a complete insomniac, they're great reads where I spend a lot of time these days writing about institutional sustainability, via diverse enrollment sources, student success. I was saying to a colleague the other day, I was lucky to be on Capitol Hill earlier this week and had a chance to share some thoughts on the student experience and how we in higher ed continue to focus on student success and outcomes. It's a common thread for us to find similarities in understanding across different geopolitical or socioeconomic or political boundaries. That's where you can find me.
That's great, John. Thanks so much for being on.
The Higher Ed Pulse is part of the Enrollify podcast network. If you like this podcast, chances are you'll like other Enrollify shows too. Our podcast network is growing by the month, and we've got a plethora of marketing, enrollment, and higher ed technology shows that are jam-packed with stories, ideas, and frameworks, all designed to empower you to be a better higher ed professional. Our show helps higher ed marketers and admission pros find their next big idea and features a selection of the industry's best as your hosts. Learn from Brian Gross, Eddie Francis, Jenny Lee Fowler, and so many of your favorite leaders in higher ed. Enrollify is made possible by Element 451, the next generation AI student engagement platform, helping institutions create meaningful and personalized interactions with students. Learn more at element451.com.